Well, hi everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to the Joe Chaffee Weather Show here on YouTube. It's Monday, the 17th of June, 2019, the day after Father's Day, and I hope everybody had an absolutely, well, all the dads out there in the audience had an absolutely terrific Father's Day. I did a little bit of work yesterday, but nonetheless did have some downtime, and it was most enjoying. So my best wishes to all of you. Getting started here on a Monday. Took 3 days off on the live stream. Not a whole lot of weather going on. Clearly there's always weather going on, but it wasn't too crazy. And I like to try to squeeze in a little bit of downtime every once in a while for those long stretches where I'm doing live streams 7 days a week. Let me quickly just remind you of a couple of things. First off, in the mornings, I've been doing Weather in 5 days in 5 minutes, usually posts on YouTube before 9 o'clock Eastern Time. So this way you can get a quick morning update on what's going on weather-wise. It tends to be focused more for areas in the northern mid-Atlantic states and on up into southern New England and in the Hudson Valley. It might extend it a little bit on either side depending on what's going on. But it's just a fast 5 minutes, show you what's happening, and lead into, let you know when the live stream is going to be on at night. The second thing, just as a reminder, if you haven't done so already, you can download my free weather app on Google Play or on the App Store. Just search Meteorologist Joe Chaffee or just Joe Chaffee, and it should come up. You can find links to it on my website, on my Facebook page. They're all over the place. So go ahead and download it. There's a new update that's going to be coming out hopefully in the next 2 weeks. Just waiting to submit it and push it to Google and to the App Store. It'll automatically go to your location, so you don't have to put it in every time, and a few other things that I did to fine-tune it just a little bit. So I hope you have downloaded it. If not, go right ahead and do that. It's absolutely free. Okay, let's get started with what's happening weather-wise. If you think back to a couple of weeks ago, if you remember when we had that pattern where we had this stalled frontal boundary running across the northern mid-Atlantic states back to the southern plains, well, guess what we have? We have a stalled frontal boundary running across the northern mid-Atlantic states going back maybe not quite all the way to the southern plains, but close enough, at least into the middle Mississippi Valley and back over into parts of Kansas and Oklahoma. And if you look at the satellite, you can see the rotation back in the middle Mississippi Valley. There are several shortwave troughs embedded in this. And as each one of these short waves moves along, the frontal boundary will buckle. Sometimes it'll buckle to the north, sometimes it'll drop back to the south. So really, depending on where you are location-wise, that is going to determine what kind of weather you're going to have. And from day to day, the frontal boundary may shift 100 miles or so, which is going to mean for some big changes and have implications on whether you get clouds and just some showery rains, or if you get heavier downpours, or if you get into severe weather. I just want to point out that there's a fourth shortwave in this. Well, today's the first one. You've got one for tomorrow, one for Wednesday, and then in the Rockies, you can see there's clouds that are dropping southeastward. Those clouds with a fourth shortwave is finally going to get this frontal boundary out of the way at the end of the week, and that one might be one to keep an eye on for Thursday, because I think that one has a shot of producing perhaps some widespread severe weather. We'll see. Storm Prediction Center is not really doing anything in their long range, but it's not. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be correct, and that they may wind up having to update it. Also, there is some disturbed weather over Florida, and on the Atlantic side, down into the Florida Straits, we're seeing showers and thunderstorms there on a slow increase today, but there's nothing at all organized. This is disorganized shower and thunderstorm activity, and the Hurricane Center is not indicating any tropical storm development over the next 5 days, both on the Atlantic and in the Pacific side. And we're going to take a look at that because the Pacific side by now should have gotten something underway, and it's been very quiet. We're 17 days into June, and we haven't seen our first named storm on the Pacific side. Okay, stand by as I'll bring up, we'll go to WPC, and take a look at the rainfall forecast map for the next 7 days. And of course, with this frontal boundary that's stalled out, is it no surprise that you're seeing this massive area of rain of 5 inches or more going from Oklahoma and Kansas east across Missouri, southern Iowa, through much of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Obviously, when it's thunderstorm driven, there's going to be some variation. But when you add it up over the course of 5 days or so, then you can spread it out. That might minimize the flooding. On the other hand, the ground is going to be thoroughly saturated. So there are going to be flooding issues. And WPC also extends an area of up to 2 or 3 inches of rain across eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey to about New York City and just touching Long Island. Some dry patches on either side of that, but it's an extension of this frontal boundary here that's running toward the coastline. The west, except for the extreme northwest, is bone dry. So is the southwest. Texas getting a bit of a break, especially down in South Texas. We're seeing a couple of inches of rain being indicated for Central and South Florida, with higher amounts out over the coastal waters, and I think that really reflects the disturbed weather that you're seeing there. That area that we showed you on the satellite. Otherwise, when you go up the Carolina coast and going westward a fair distance inland, rainfall amounts in this area are generally under a half an inch, and in some cases under a quarter of an inch. We're winding down here the last few days of spring, soon going into summer, and it's pretty interesting how the pattern that's evolved is not really very summer-like go for the eastern part of the United States. We'll touch on that when we take a look at the long range. All right, as far as watches and warnings that are going on tonight, we do have this extensive area of flash flood watches up from the southern half of Missouri, southern Illinois, southern Indiana, much of Ohio, northeastern Kentucky, a good chunk of West Virginia, at least half of Pennsylvania, and most of New Jersey except the northwestern part of the state, the northern part of the state, I should say. And of course, you also see in the salmon colors 2 working severe thunderstorm watches that we have. An extensive one in West Texas and on into eastern New Mexico. The other one that right now goes from northeastern Virginia, much of the state of Maryland, southeastern Pennsylvania, and the southern part of New Jersey, mainly south of Route 195. If you get a map of New Jersey, a road map of New Jersey, you'll see that 195 runs east-west and basically cuts the state in half. And it makes it useful for when you forecast for New Jersey, which is 200 miles or more from north to south, and you could have the days sometimes, especially in the fall season, late fall, going into the winter and spring, where it could be a 30-40 degree spread between what's in North Jersey and what's in South Jersey. I think the biggest spread I once saw was about a 60 degree spread, where it was 20 up in northwest Sussex County and it was close to 80 down near Cape May. So here's a look at the Storm Prediction Center's risk areas for tonight. We have 4 slight risk areas for severe weather being indicated. You can figure out on the map where they are. And in the blue boxes are the working severe thunderstorm watches that are up as of 6:08 Eastern Time. So if you are watching this on a replay, always remember that the radars and satellites are dated, and you want to get your updated weather forecast by going to your local National Weather Service forecast office page, and you can access that by going to weather.gov. All right, on we go. Let's move it along here, and we're going to bring up. We'll start with the current map. I want to start at least with the current situation that's going on in the severe thunderstorm watch area that is up for New Jersey, for the southern half of New Jersey, down to Delaware, Maryland, northeastern Virginia. And the temperature dew points here, the 70 dew points run right up to about Route 195. And you can see temperatures. Some of this is being impacted now. Some of the temperatures are being impacted by the fact that we've had a few thunderstorms go by in the last hour. Nothing severe that I've seen, but they've cooled the temperatures down some. But much of the area in the watch, much of the spots in the watch area were in the 80s. And in fact, if you go down into South Jersey, where some places have not gotten to any showers, Woodbine is at 90 degrees right now. Atlantic City at International Airport at 82. Vineland is at 90. I was questioning Vineland's temperature because they were 90 a couple of hours ago, but since another spot has shown up with a 90, I suppose it's possible. I don't know exactly where the thermometer there is, if it's on pavement or not. But the bottom line is that this is where, on the southern side of that frontal boundary, you're getting ample daytime heating, dew points that are reaching up into the low 70s. And as you look at the overlaid radar as of 6:10, there are some big cells here that are indicated throughout parts of northeastern Virginia and on up through Maryland to the Delaware state line. And then there are a couple of strong cells. Looks like there's a strong heavy rain being reported here at Wilmington, for example, at Wilmington Airport, with a temperature of 75 and a dew point of 72, and they got to 88 for a high temperature. You can find this tool, by the way, if you go to weather.gov and click on the area in and around South Jersey, the Mount Holly Weather Service page. It's on their home page, and this is very easy to use. It's easier to use than the EDD, the electronic digital display that the Weather Service has. This has simple menus that you can pull up right here on the sidebar and bring up the menus, and you can overlay all sorts of combinations of current weather, and the maps update every 15 minutes or so. The one issue that I have with it so far that I've noticed is one of the base maps, not the base map, I'm sorry, one of the overlay maps, the layers here, the watches and the hazards and warnings doesn't always work very well, okay? Sometimes they'll come on and then they'll just disappear. So I don't know if they've got this thing running up to speed. It's a relatively new product, and maybe they're still fine-tuning it. So there are sometimes certain parts of it don't work as well as others. But otherwise, I think it's it's very good. Going further north, by the way, as we head up into the Hudson Valley, for example, and on up through New England, you've got some nice air up here. Temperatures generally in the 70s. There are even some low 80s showing up, but the dew points are really nice. They're in the 50s. It's comfortable. The humidity is very low. We're at a time of year, by the way, we're certainly at a time of year where if you're the further south that you go and you're sitting in solid cloud cover all day, you're going to be a whole lot cooler than places well to the north. Those places to the north, if they're enjoying a day of wall-to-wall sunshine, you're going to wind up seeing temperatures like you're seeing here, where you've got upper 70s and low 80s in parts of central New England. And then when we head further south and you see areas around Long Island and in the Hudson Valley, we are mostly in the lower 70s, even upper 60s showing up for current temperatures. It's just the nature of the time of year, the higher sun angle, the longer daylight, and now, of course, we're going into the next few days with the arrival of summer and the summer solstice, and the longest day of the year from sunrise to sunset is almost upon us. So it makes a huge difference. Cloud cover makes a huge difference, as does wind direction during this time of year. Here's SPC's view of that watch area in the east. You can see the current radars overlaid on it. Not that much in terms of severe thunderstorm warnings that are showing up. And on the full U.S. view, of course, you start to see these short waves that are in play. The first one coming through tonight, not especially impressive, yet we are seeing in that warm sector those showers and storms firing up through Maryland down into Virginia. Then you have a bit of a break. And the second short wave firing up storms tonight across Indiana and Ohio. It'll be interesting to see how much of this is left and makes it across, because short-range models are moving these various pieces along. So that means that there's the threat for showers and downpours overnight and during the day on Tuesday. But trying to figure out how they show up by using the mesoscale models is pretty much a waste of time. I think the best approach, if you're near this frontal boundary, the best approach really is to just anticipate that there could be showers or thunderstorms at any time, but that much of the time it won't be raining. If you know you're north of the frontal boundary, the rains will tend to be showery in nature, maybe not a whole lot in the way of heavy downpours and thunderstorms. When that frontal boundary buckles and you get into the warm sector, that's when you can possibly get hit fairly hard. And of course, you see all the action that's going on back to the west across the plains and into the Rockies. And again, this is the short wave. This last one that's going to be moving into the east on Thursday is one I'm paying a little bit more attention to because it's fairly impressive on the upper air. And the dynamics look robust enough that I think that we could see, if you're going to talk about an outbreak of severe weather being more widespread, widespread in quotes, I think the one for Thursday is the one to really keep your eyes on. And that'll be the last one of the bunch before we head into the weekend. All right, so I'm going to take a swig of water here. And we'll keep going. Okay, so what's on this one? Oh, that's not what I wanted to do next. So we got that all taken squared away. Let's take a look at what the weather models are doing and why they're doing it. So we've got the GFS up. The new GFS, by the way, which is the old, was the parallel. If we usually have been putting up this version of it, which shows the actual measured rainfall in 6-hour increments. But if you, on the new one, on the new GFS, there is an option on Tropical Tidbits, my go-to website for weather maps, and it should be yours too, tropicaltidbits.com. If you go to radar, rain, and frozen, it'll actually show you what the GFS thinks the radar is supposed to look like. And this, I think, speaks to the dilemma of the forecast over the next couple of days with this frontal boundary that is running from central New Jersey, across Pennsylvania, through Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, back through Missouri, and back over into Oklahoma and Kansas. It's all a matter of when it buckles and the timing of these short waves moving along. For example, on this particular run, it looks like the GFS wants to have a fairly robust-looking radar tomorrow morning with some downpours and possible thunderstorms lasting into early afternoon before we see it start to sink southward again for Tuesday night. Then they fire up again Wednesday afternoon into Wednesday evening before they settle down. And here's the system I'm talking about for Thursday, which is the last one. You actually get a fairly wrapped up surface low. Now suddenly the GFS on this run is taking this low pretty far to the south. So it actually is keeping the frontal boundary south of Long Island and New York City here, where it takes a surface low across southern Ohio and off the New Jersey coast. I mean, if this were correct, if this is correct, southern New England would be in a northeast wind and an onshore flow and temperatures probably just into the 60s, extending down into New York City and northern New Jersey. And you might see a severe weather outbreak of some kind in southern Pennsylvania down through the Delmarva Peninsula. Models up until now have been showing the low being further north than this, and that's kind of the way I was going. I'm a little skeptical of seeing the low this far south. But if you've got a stronger shortwave that is running out ahead for Wednesday into Wednesday night, that might push the frontal boundary further south. So this is something we're going to have to keep an eye on. If we wind up with a surface low that goes to, say, northern Ohio and through upstate New York, then I think you could wind up seeing something along the lines of what the 12Z GFS did, which was to take a surface low up through northern Pennsylvania, northern New Jersey, and that would probably produce some severe weather from New Jersey on southward into Virginia and North Carolina, with more overrunning precip up to the north. And the European was actually further north than this. The bottom line is this is the strongest of the bunch. It's also the last one of the bunch. And that should lead to improving weather conditions toward Friday although we could see some lingering precip here Friday if this front gets hung up. And then as the upper trough shifts offshore, it's very impressive with a low that develops south of Nova Scotia. We're going to see drier conditions, gusty winds, and at least a good start to the weekend with sunshine. And what I'm hoping is that this ridge that builds into the eastern states holds on long enough so that both Saturday and Sunday wind up being okay. At least that's the plan, because after that, we're going to see the next weather system approaching for the first part of next week. Although, if you look at the GFS, it doesn't look all that impressive at this point. But let's go look at the upper air and see what goes on. This is a very frustrating time of year to forecast when you get into the late spring, early summer, where you're kind of subject to these small-scale events that are occurring in the atmosphere, and it just makes it difficult because you don't know if models are overplaying or underplaying certain short waves. So you have to really pay close attention to the radar to see what's holding up and what isn't. But when we look at this upper air, notice that you've got a lot of indentations there in those height lines. You've got a lot of little short waves running around, and each one has its own little area of shower and thunderstorm activity. So it really becomes difficult to try to time these out and figure which ones dominate, which ones will perhaps strengthen a bit, which ones will fall apart. But the bottom line is, in terms of the overall flow, as we go through this week, you start to see that there's one fairly solid shortwave that gets ejected out of the plains here and comes into the eastern part of the United States. Also, notice what's going on near the borders on the west and on the west coast. Western Canada and in eastern Canada. You've got two strong upper lows here that are dominating the atmosphere. The one in eastern Canada has its own shortwave that's rotating around. So we have to kind of wait for that to happen in order for the dry air to start to come in, which it will. You also have the trough in the west with an upper low near Lake Winnipeg and a trough down into the southwest. That's amplifying as well. So you have two relatively robust amplified troughs, one on both sides, one off the east coast, one back through the plains and Rockies. So a ridge, a nice ridge, has to pop up in between, and that's what you have. You have a ridge that's amplifying in between that, and that's why I'm thinking that we should have a decent weekend. Now, eventually, energy starts to come out of that plains trough and runs into the Great Lakes as we move into early next week, but in terms of timing, if the trough in the east takes its time pulling out, which it seems to be doing on this model run, and the plains trough takes a little longer to come out, we could hold on to the ridge and actually string together back-to-back days or maybe 72 to 84 hours worth of decent weather before things start to deteriorate once again. On the overall scheme of things in terms of the upper air, we'll go to the North America view, and you will notice that you still have, this is still a very amplified look for the upper air for June 24th. You've got a wrapped up vortex up in northern Canada. You have an extension, the jet, two upper lows, one off the west coast, actually three, one off the west coast, one right along the shores of Hudson Bay, and then another one off of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. This is next Monday. So you do have a Pacific jet that's suppressed pretty far to the south. The westerlies get all the way down in the southern tip of the Baja Peninsula. And of course, there's your ridge in between. Again, we're talking for next weekend. And after that, you start to see a bit of an upper high that builds from the Pacific side into the Gulf of Mexico. So you have a strong ridge in the Gulf of Mexico, but it's east-west oriented. So you still have a jet that is dominating a westerly flow, dominating things at least from North Carolina. If you follow that 588 height line, where you see 588, so you have that's basically where the base of the westerly winds in the upper atmosphere are. You can't get hot with this, okay? You probably are going to have some very warm to hot temperatures right along the immediate Gulf Coast. Hey, breaking news, it's always like that there. So The westerlies actually extend pretty far to the south for this time of year, so you're getting a nice, flow of air moving from west to east. It can't get hot with this type of upper air. It's got to, you got to see something change. You certainly have to get rid of this amplified look if you're going to want to see, if you're a fan of hot and humid weather and temperatures in the 90s every day. But as long as you've got this westerly flow going on north of 35 degrees north, at least for the mid-Atlantic states, particularly the northern mid-Atlantic states, and certainly for the Northeast and back through the Great Lakes and in through the northern plains and in through the Northwest. This is a cooler than average pattern overall. All right, let's jump over to the tropics. I pulled up some satellite loops tonight, which you can get on the GOES 16 satellite, which you can access from weather.gov fairly easily. I'm pulling up the Pacific side, and we're looking at the southern Mexico and down in through Central America and to Panama. Noticing that there really isn't a whole lot there. You do have some convection that's developed out to the west, but nothing that really shows any sign of development anytime soon. And when we go a bit further to the west, there's a lot of shear out in the Pacific. South of Hawaii, you see these clouds are blowing pretty much from west to east, all across the Pacific between 10 degrees north and 20 degrees north. So it looks like, at least for now, that conditions aren't especially favorable for development. We are seeing some convection increasing south of 10 degrees north, but again, nothing that is going to, nothing that's showing signs of development. The Hurricane Center saying nothing expected for the next 5 days. And Anthony Orr pointed out that by June 17th, in most years, you in the Pacific side, you usually have already gone through the A storm at the very least. So the Pacific getting underway quite late. By the way, if you look up off the coast of the Baja Peninsula and on up toward California, you can see the low clouds, the cold ocean having and the impact it has. And you see these low clouds hugging the coastline during the nighttime and early morning hours, and then gradually that fog does tend to burn off, only to come back at night. But you've got that cool Pacific air that's dropping southward, extends pretty far south, almost to about 20 degrees north. The impact of the cold ocean in the Pacific is a big one, and of course it limits how far north early season storms can get anyhow. And even during the height of season, when the water temperatures are their warmest, they're still not supportive of tropical storms once you get north of 20 degrees north, and particularly once you go north of 25 degrees north. On the Atlantic side, also very quiet. Obviously, the tropical Atlantic is something we usually don't concern ourselves with until we get later into the month of July, particularly toward the last week of July and going into August, when the Cape Verde season is active. It's just maybe about a 6-week window that you have. But if you watch the clouds here on this loop, a lot of shear going on in the tropical Atlantic. Anyway, the semi-permanent shear that is there in the eastern Caribbean, the high clouds coming off South America, they're blowing away from southwest to northeast. So you have highly unfavorable conditions for development. There's not much going on in the central and western Caribbean. Some patchy clouds moving from west to east, but there are no disturbances at play. And of course, you've got that disturbed weather that is showing up north of Cuba and off the Florida coast. There's some kind of trough in there. I haven't really analyzed it too closely, but there's nothing here that really spells like trouble with regards to tropical cyclone development. And by the way, it's June 17th. We've gone many a June where we haven't seen a named storm for the month. So if we wind up going through June, and if we go through much of the month of July without seeing a named storm in the Atlantic Basin, there's nothing unusual that is at play here. So just to summarize really quick, and then I'll come on to the chat board for a short time. Just to summarize, with respect to those of you that are dealing with those frontal boundary issues, be advised that I'm going to bring myself a full screen first. Be advised that, again, the best way to approach it is just watch the radars. The possibility of a shower or a downpour or even a heavier thunderstorm anytime between now and through Thursday, it's always going to be there. But there will be long stretches where it won't be raining. If you are north of the frontal boundary, good for you. You're possibly in better shape in avoiding some heavy rains and some severe weather. If you're south of the frontal boundary, different story. You will be dealing with rounds of severe weather. So it's probably important, if you're in that battleground zone, pay attention to your temperatures, pay attention to the wind direction. If you see your temperatures jumping up into the 80s, that's probably a good indicator that it puts you more at risk for severe weather than anything else. If you're in the low 70s with lots of low clouds, then you're probably in good shape in avoiding the severe weather. And of course, you're going to be watching this frontal boundary just buckling back and forth. Javon Perry. I've noticed, Joe, that in the El Nino years, the long, significant heat waves come in the second to almost end of the summers in southern New England, and the tropics will also wake up from hibernating as well. The tropics part, definitely, that would be the case. They do tend to start later, not always, but in general. And I've been throwing this out there, is the question of the strength of this El Nino, which looks fairly weak. So if it stays weak through the summer months, that might juice up activity, or if it trends back to neutral through the summer months, that might juice up activity. If the strong El Nino years usually get the Pacific going relatively early, so that's why I'm just kind of fascinated by the fact that we're 17 days into the month of June and already 1 month into the Pacific hurricane season in the Eastern Pacific, and we haven't seen anything yet. So I think that is worth watching. Bear in mind that on the Pacific side, we could see 4 storms develop very relatively quickly. I think there was one stretch last year in June where we got 4 of them. I got to go back in a row. There were 22 cyclones in the East Pacific. But in June, it just kind of, all of a sudden, there was one after another. So that could certainly happen at some point. It's possible. But while we've got things quiet in the Pacific, I'm just going to see how long that quiet period lasts. I see Howard and Lisa, Howard Vanderhoff and Lisa Nieves are listening to me in the car like it's a podcast, and that's great, terrific. You can always go back and look at the graphics later, or you can go on the website. I wrote stuff on this. It's all on meteorologistjoechaffee.com, or if you're on the app, you can go ahead and read it from there. The gardens are loving this weather. The cooler than average temperatures are certainly helpful. You save money on AC and you save money on water, because you don't have to run the sprinkler systems as much. I'm just going to really quick, I want to check what's going on locally just to make sure that we don't have any warnings up. And actually, there is one small severe thunderstorm warning. Actually, it's a special marine warning in Chesapeake Bay. Otherwise, at the moment, in the severe thunderstorm watch area from the southern half of New Jersey, southeastern PA, Delaware, much of Maryland into northeast Virginia, which, by the way, includes Washington, D.C., and Baltimore, and Philadelphia is technically not in it. They're kind of on the edge. We don't see anything that's happening as of 6:33 Eastern time. All right, I'm just going to run through the chat, the rest of your chat for those of you who posted earlier. Robert Brown, talking about that winning fish. They caught a 914-pound blue marlin. $794,000 was the top prize. I wonder how many guys that was split. What was the split with the number of people that are on that particular boat? But still, close to $800,000 is an awful lot of money. And my buddy Phil was in a shark tournament last year, and they took down top prize, and I think if I remember correctly, his split was about 7,500, something like that. But by the way, it's very interesting how they monitor these tournaments here. I never knew this, but you've got New York State DEC officials that are on top of this, and there are strict rules that these tournaments follow, and none of this is wasted. By the way, the shark actually are very useful because they are able to do research they take samples from the sharks when they bring them in. They check to see what's inside the shark's belly, so they know how healthy the sharks are out there, and how healthy is the fish population in general out offshore. So if they didn't have these shark tournaments, the researchers wouldn't be able to check to see how the health of the fish out in the coastal waters. And the meat itself is either is consumed, or what a lot of the fishermen do is that they keep some of it for themselves and they donate the rest to some of the some of the shelters that are on Long Island. So none of this goes to any waste. I was very and by the way, the shark is delicious if you haven't had it. Cooked on the grill, it is awesome. Nitrovert, do you think this pattern next week or two will be active severe weather pattern for you up in southeastern Minnesota? Well, you're going to get that trough coming back into the Plains and Rockies, so I would say that, yeah, if going into next week, you might see severe weather shift up more toward back to the plains and maybe up into the central and northern plains. But that's a pretty deep trough for this time of year that's setting up in the western half of the United States. All right, folks, we'll call an end to it here. Father's Day spread did look delicious. That actually was on Saturday. Lisa, those of you on my Facebook page, I was at a barbecue place. Hoodoo, was it? I want to make sure I get this right because it was so good. Hang on, I just want to check. I'm going to go check back on my, because I did Instagram that barbecue, was amazing. So, and I tagged it, so let's see. Here we go. I was at this was in Danbury, a place called Hoodoo Brown Barbecue, and there was a good 45-minute wait, and we went early. But I have to tell you, the food was just absolutely outstanding. Between the beef, the chicken, the pulled pork, the cornbread was, I haven't had cornbread that good since I lived down in New Orleans. It was amazing. So if you want good barbecue and you're in Connecticut, that's a great place to go to. And they didn't pay me to say that. I'm saying that quite honestly. The food was outstanding, and the atmosphere was also very much barbecue atmosphere. It was great. All right, everybody, thanks for being here tonight. We're going to attempt the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight on Facebook at 9:20, so keep your fingers crossed. And of course, don't forget, in the mornings you have Weather in 5 days in 5 minutes, and we'll have that up for you on YouTube probably before 9 o'clock Eastern time, and then back tomorrow night with our regular live stream either at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks for being here, folks. Really appreciate it. Good night.